just having a conversation with Stephen the other day about a recent client, or current client, female client, recently started having some real success within her program. How far is she into this program?
2 months.
Okay, so like 8 weeks.
Yeah.
The big thing was like she finally got her protein numbers in line. So she started eating up the amount of protein that she was supposed to be eating, which apparently was quite a challenge for her for a while.
It's a common challenge in general. But yeah, it was, maybe hitting the number here and there, and then had some lean protein. I think it was chicken breast or something like that, like 4 to 6 ounces, somewhere in that range, twice a day, and boom, all of a sudden this impossible protein goal was met.
Yeah. It's interesting. And then all of a sudden, like, we start seeing some results like we've never seen before. Like, we start losing a little bit of weight. Like, oh, the body fat's changing a little bit here, and my clothes are fitting a little bit differently, and this isn't as hard as I thought it was, and why did I make it so hard? And I think a lot of this just boils down to, until you kind of cross that line, that threshold of, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like, or this is how you do it, you have no idea. I mean, I've had several incidents like that in my life where it's like, oh shit, like the whole you don't know what you don't know kind of thing.
Yeah.
You guys ever had those?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it before we got started. I actually forget now how we even got on the topic, but we were discussing, it's because you couldn't see your phone.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, it's because you
couldn't see the writing on my phone.
Couldn't see the document on your phone. And then we got into my lack of vision that is corrected through the wonder of modern contact lenses, and how I discovered that I was visually challenged when I was in high school. I was on the baseball field. I was always a good defender, infielder at that time, and I just kept making errors that I would not usually make.
I think you were saying timing errors.
Yeah, it was. Just taking reps, taking ground balls. My coach at the time, who was kind of a dick, but he was right about some things. Knew what he was doing, but he was just kind of a dick. And he kept observing me making these mistakes, and everything looked like my form was good. Everything mechanics were all good. And one day he's like, "Can you see?" And I was like,
"What do you mean?"
Yeah, I can see you right now. Like, what are you talking about? He's like, you seem to be mistiming the ball. Like, you seem to be approaching it, like everything looks good, but just something's like out of sync, like something's off. And I had also started to notice, I had always had kind of some trouble like seeing the board in class, but I just thought like, oh, I'm just sitting kind of towards the back, no one can see this far. And then I got my eyes checked, and I wore glasses for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, this is what you guys are seeing?
I think you said, wait, those trees have leaves?
You guys can see the leaves on the trees?
Wow.
Like, I saw like a green mass, basically, and I could see individual leaves on the trees, and I was like, holy shit. And I remember the first game that I played while I was wearing glasses, I was like, I can see now. Wow, this is okay. This is
dumb question, but what does that do for the timing?
It seemed to improve it.
Like, now you're hitting the ball instead of
exactly. Yeah, it reflected at the plate as well. I'm like smoking balls, and I'm like, oh wow, because I can fucking see it now.
See the thing coming at me.
Yeah, this seems so much. Yeah, it's so much clearer. It's not like a sort of blurred mass coming at me. Like I can see the seams. I can actually see the ball clearly. Like, wow. How long have I not been able to see?
Well, so while this might have been a little bit of a rough setup for me to get you into that story that I heard you telling a little while ago, it doesn't take away from the client that we were talking about. And just like this, all of a sudden you have these like epiphanies. But how long do people go through? How long could you have stayed if your coach hadn't said that?
Yeah.
How much longer would you have, maybe sucked at baseball?
Yeah.
Without knowing how much better you could have been until you could actually see what the fuck was going on. And
yeah.
I think that's kind of the bigger thing. We have these conversations with people, and today's conversation is very specifically around the nutrition component, about all the things that they think they know because of how they've gathered their information. And in the world of nutrition, obviously being very confusing, a very big place, very, very dynamic too. It seems to always be changing. The reality of it is it doesn't. it really doesn't change. It really is the same. I mean, and you talk to the true experts in the field, the people that really do the science of the research on this stuff or really work on this stuff on the other day, they basically agree on almost everything. Mm-hmm. You know, there's tribes and things that of diet types, or, you know, people because of financial reasons will do studies or research for different companies or different foods, which obviously creates, you know, that can be problematic because there's a financial gain to be made and all that. I think that's where the arguments come in. It's usually in the minutia, the basic shit. Like nobody's arguing about any of this. There's a lot of people trying to make it more confusing or make it into something that it isn't.
Make it seem like they have a novel answer.
But there isn't one. Yeah. There isn't one. It really is basic. And so like the question is like, how come you're not hitting the ball? Like, we've been through all the mechanics there. You know the mechanics. Like, you watched all the fucking YouTube videos, right? You watch baseball on TV. You know, you got the batting coach, you got the hitting coach. Is it possible that there's something else going on here that you're not quite aware of? And I think that's the bigger thing. And then once they get, maybe that needs to be pointed out to them. And, you know, in this case, it's a coach basically making you aware. Like, dude, let's talk about your eyesight for a second, which, you know, like how many coaches are really getting into that with their students, whether the guy's being a dick or not. Yeah. Like, that could be the difference between you being really frustrated with baseball or not even making the team or not even playing and excelling at baseball and going on to play in college.
I was frustrated at the time because it was out of character. You know, this was early in high school and I had never had these issues before. And I was like, why is this happening?
Yeah,
like,
puberty's setting in, like, vision's changing, things are changing in your body, right? I mean, this is typically when people have these things happen.
All of a sudden there was inconsistency that wasn't there before. And I was frustrated. Like, what's happening here?
Body's maturing, things are changing in life, hormones are changing, right? You're literally growing physically and physiologically, you're changing. And that's what happens with people along the way, right? In life and with whatever it is that they're doing. So whether that's their fitness or in this case, we're talking about today is their nutrition, they're trying to basically maybe do some fundamentals. And when those fundamentals aren't necessarily working for them, then they reach for these, like, they reach into the weeds for like a piece of equipment or an app or I don't know, some special trick, as if there's something novel that's going to fix their problem. And going back, it really ends up having to do a lot with fundamentals. And so I ask people, you know, questions all the time about what they're doing. And they want to give me a lot of detail about stuff like, well, you know, I only eat this way. And it seems like they're very organized as they're telling the story. Like, they've thought about the answer. They've thought about the answer to this question a lot, not just like I'm asking them for the first time. The things that come up for the first times are actually more, I think are more questions around, well, then if you know all that and you're really doing that, then what's the problem? And that's the question they can't answer. They can't answer that question. And a lot of times it's because it's mired in all this other like details and stuff.
Having to pull back the layers of the onion.
Peeling back the layers of the onion. And I see so many people getting very frustrated as we get into that line of questioning, and there's almost like a resistance that starts to happen to it.
You get defensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For a lot of reasons. I mean, it sounds like have you recently had this conversation with somebody?
I actually have, with a couple different people on the floor, you know, clients of mine. And one of them's getting ready to go to Hawaii, I think in a week or two. And she started this, I think 3 or 4 months ago of, Cece, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be consistent and I'm going to start my diet. And I'm like, okay. So
your diet, you're going to start your diet.
What's your diet going to be like? Tell me about that. And, I'm cutting my calories and da-da-da-da. And I said, whatever her name is. So what's your protein at these days? I don't know, but I'm eating a lot. I'm like, well, that's vague. What's a lot?
Yep.
Well, I can't eat anymore or else I'm going to be sick. Well, where are you at? She couldn't even give me a base as far as how many grams of protein she was getting a day. So
cutting
over the last
calories from what number?
Yeah,
exactly.
So many things in that. Yeah.
You know, I think it was 3 weeks ago. She's like, okay, I'm going to start eating more protein.
Today's the day.
Yeah, I know.
3 weeks before the vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
we're going to get it started now.
There was 2 weeks we were gone. I was out of the studio. And so she was training with another coach. And I came back and I could really see the difference. And she said, I've been really focusing on eating my protein a lot more than I was before. And I said, that's great. She's like, I'm feeling, she still can't give me a number, but she can tell me that she's having a lot of protein, quote unquote, a lot of protein with every meal. Right. And I'm like, you know what? That's at least a start for you, because before she was lucky to have protein at every meal.
At least there's awareness building.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it starts with like, I'm going to be in for my workouts. Like this is the first priority is that I just need to work out more, need to burn more calories, or actually show up for the appointments and sessions that I have, or I'm supposed to be there. I think that's pretty common. I think people listening to this can all relate to that. Like if they're getting ready for some event or they wanted to drop a few pounds, again, these are basic fundamentals. Like they understand the calories in, calories out equation, CECO, as it's referred to. You can refer to it on the podcast, but people get that. Like, okay, so I need to work out a little bit more, and generally speaking, I should probably be eating a little bit less, but that's not always the right answer, and that's the point. Like they understand that concept or that principle. They have zero clue how it applies to them. Now, here's the other part about this. If they do understand how it applies to them, the questions going back to my, the confusion that exists out there and people actually getting it done, the question should be then, why aren't you executing the things that you say or think that you know? That's the real question. And when you can start answering that question, all these other things start getting a lot more clear, and they can be very easily resolved. But because you're not asking yourself that question, none of this other stuff really matters, right now. So like, and you just mentioned like, okay, calories in, calories out is a thing, right? I mean, you want to lose weight, you have to be in a deficit. But if you're already in a deficit, right, your body's going to metabolically adapt. We can talk about that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think from a broad conceptual standpoint, eat less, move more. But if, like your client, if you don't know where you are currently, then it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't necessarily apply to you. You don't know how to adjust it. You don't know how much to adjust it. You don't, maybe you have, maybe you've had some success in the past, cut the calories, cut the carbs. You've done all of that. You've lost some weight in the past. And then, you loosened up a little bit and it came right back. And you don't really quite know what you did to be successful. You just know like, I just didn't eat very much and I worked out more and then it worked, but then it stopped working, and you still, so let me, do I go back to just severely restricting calories? That I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
So, it's, I think from broad conceptual standpoint, they understand, but specific application, maybe not quite as nuanced as they.
I think the part of what you were just kind of explaining there is the up and the down is like, if you haven't examined it in the last 3 months, then you don't know where you're at. And it's changed, by the way. Like how your body is responding to whatever you did to it 3 months ago is not going to be the same today. So if all things were created equal and we just, you were taking in the same amount of calories and let's say you're hitting the same protein goal and whatever else, your body is going to adapt to that. So whatever you were doing for the last 3 months, you need to be aware of that and be out in front of it because your body will adapt to that. So if you were in that deficit 3 months ago, your body is not going to be operating the same on the same amount of calories that you were on 3 months ago. So reaching back to, again, that vague number, whatever it was, like, well, I was doing this and this worked for a little while and then it didn't and I loosened it up, so I'll just go back. Understand that what you're going back to or where you were at now as compared to where you're going back to are two totally different places because your body adapted. It lost some weight, maybe lost body fat, maybe there was some lean tissue in there as well. Like, I don't want to get into that. It's hard to burn up lean tissue, right? Very hard. I mean, people think, oh, if I'm under 20 grams of protein today, like gains are gone. Like I'm in a catabolic state and I'll lose all the
wasting away.
Yeah, exactly. I'm literally wasting away from a muscle tissue perspective. Nah, it doesn't work like that. But my point is like, if you reduce calories in month 1, by the end of month 1, your body's adapting significantly to that by maybe a reduction in body fat, a reduction in weight on the scale, if you will. And then it keeps adjusting to figure out, hey, you're not giving me as many calories as you were. I need to be as efficient at doing the activity or fulfilling the demands that you're giving to me with only the amount that you're giving to me now. So I'm going to downregulate a few things. I'm going to figure this out. So then 3 months down the road, this process is continued. So even if you're going back to the deficit that you were in before, that could still be above what your deficit should be now. And that's bad. That could be very bad if you're eating way, way, way below your caloric maintenance. And I don't want to get too far into it, but the point is like you understand, when I say you, the general user understands the CECO thing, right? And that, hey, I got to expend a little bit more energy than I'm taking in, and I should have my calories balanced in a way that gives me the energy. but you've not done the work and you don't understand what that specifically means for you. And it takes work to understand that. It doesn't take very long, but for some people it takes longer, and they need to be coached through it. And that starting point is critical, like understanding where you are at that time from a history. Where were you 3 months before that time, right? And what have you been doing? Where were you a year before that time? So reaching back to these things, or I think the bigger challenging part for things is like they latch on to one of these diet tribes or these diet types, thinking that's the answer.
Yeah, and there's a lot of there's a ton of noise out there. So I think that almost it convinces people that the fundamentals that they already do know the fundamentals, but then they get caught up in the minutia and caught up in, all of the noise out there, all of the confusion. This guy says this woman says that, this influencer says that. And now all of a sudden what they thought they knew is coming into question. And they're like, well, maybe actually it's more complicated than I thought, because this person says I need to do this, but then this person says that. And then, it just leads to a lot of, going 20 different directions and losing sight of the big rocks.
Yeah, the big rocks being the bigger picture of what is really going on. And a lot of that confusion, I think, lies in we talked about this, like this minutia of, you want to have a conversation with me about erythritol or sucralose or, how diet sodas or whatever are so bad for you. And you've cut all those out of your diet, and yet you're still not achieving your goals. So maybe that's not the thing that's really important right now. I'm not advocating like you should be like, these are not a problem, or, they don't impact people in certain ways. Look, there's a lot of stuff we could be talking about there, but does that shit matter? Because it's all based on your goal. If your goal is to look, feel, and perform your best, then those things may come into the picture. But for now, we need to tackle these big rocks or tackle these big fundamentals. And again, if you're talking to me about sucralose, but you don't know where your current caloric intake is, you're trying to get a master's degree, right? When you haven't even graduated high school yet.
You're focusing on the fringes, majoring in the minors. And I think that leads to frustration, because it feels like you're putting a lot of energy into it, but you're putting your energy into the 10% when you could be putting your energy into the 90% that's going to really produce results.
Yeah, somebody posted this today. I think it was Mike Pannone. You guys know him as CTT Solutions out there if you're into the firearms instruction space. And this post, it was literally today, it said, don't mistake hard work for results. And I would, I just kind of replacing the word that don't replace all these efforts that you think and all this solid effort that you think you're putting in for actual results, because those are two very different things. And, it takes effort to get results, but just because you put effort in doesn't mean you're going to get the result that you want. And I think that's a strong parallel that people could make to workouts and everything else. Like, what are you really achieving? What could be measured, and how are you managing that? And when you look at those things, those are very important things to ultimately achieving a result, both in the short and the long term. And I think what people get very frustrated with nutrition is again, they get kind of lost in the weeds, and they really feel like they do understand it. And they also consciously or subconsciously, they recognize that they're not executing the things that they probably should be executing in order to get that result. So they're maybe trying to shortcut, which is like, I'll just work out harder. I'll go to jiu-jitsu 2 more sessions a week, and that'll help me. And that works for a second. It works for a minute until it doesn't, because again, your body's adapting and you really haven't adjusted any of the fundamentals. Exercise is a fundamental to looking, feeling, and performing better, 100%. But what you're putting in terms of inputs is 1,000% going to impact the outputs. Way more than the outputs being put in are going to impact it the other way. The point of this is I think I see people getting frustrated with like, yeah, man, I know this. Like this is very elementary. Give me the juicy shit. There is no juicy shit.
Yeah, give me the
you
secret
still
key.
Don't know how many calories you're putting in your body, right? This is an important thing. There's nothing sexy here.
Exactly. That parallel goes the same with training.
With fitness. Yeah, you haven't organized yourself here. Like that frustrates me. Frustrates me in the conversations. I'm getting DMs about like, well, what about this supplement? What about that supplement? I'm like,
Doing the basics first.
Yeah, there's a lot of good things about that, but I get questioned actually about if you guys listen to the show, you know that I'm a huge fan of BioPro and their product out there. It's done tremendous things for me, tremendous results, and I'll talk about that more on the show at another time. But again, if you've listened, you've heard about it. And here's the thing: like people are reaching out, going, "I hear you talking about it, and I've heard you, in your podcast talking about it a little bit. How's it work?" And I go, "Fucking works great for me." And while I've been doing all these things and I've been doing all that, and it's never the basics about nutrition, and it's never the basics about fitness, and it's never the basics about managing stress in their life, right, and managing their sleep and all that stuff. And so the only thing I can tell them is like I have had tremendous results with this because all of those other things are managed and measured in a way where I know if I twist this, this dial or toggle this switch over here, it's going to have this impact. So, what I get from that is a very small percentage in terms of I would say boost to all of those other things. But that percentage for me at this point in my life, right, with all the work and effort that I put in and as organized as I try to stay around things, is very, very, very fucking important to me. But if what you're doing is you're choosing that without looking at all these we've said a million times on the show, get your house in order. That's not the right place to start. But if you're getting your house in order, then the little things, can really, really have a benefit. And I'm not saying like even if your house is totally out of order, a product like BioPro can't help you. I think it can. I just think like if you want to maximize the benefits of what you're doing and what you're putting in, and the spend that you make,
the
investment that you're making in time and money and effort, like why the hell not would you get there? And so again, or get to this point where you're very organized, and that's where I, like I said, I kind of get a little bit frustrated with folks where they're looking for things. I'm like, dude, you are the man of the house. You are. It's a lot of guys, a lot of time, a lot of dudes. You're the man of the house. You're managing finance. You're managing your job. You're managing your kids. You're a coach for the kids' soccer or football or baseball team or whatever else. You've got you've got your day trading somehow too. You're finding ways to manage that finance. You've got these hobbies and all these other things. Yet you know a lot about that stuff. If I asked you any level of detail about your bank account, if I was your accountant or your finance manager or whatever else, you could tell me to the fucking penny what you were doing or what you were not doing with that stuff because it's that important to you. But when I ask you about this, and you're looking for like if you went to your finance manager and said, what can I do to boost my earnings by, or my portfolio by $100,000 in the next month, right? He's going to be able to just go, well, we got to get all this shit lined up over here. We have to put it here. And that dude might be a little bit, I don't know which financial situation is. That might be a little bit ambitious. We might need to do this kind of one chunk at a time. That might be a really poor example, but the point of this is like, we got these dudes out there that I hear from constantly. And they're like, well, what should I do here? What should I do here? The first thing you need to do is start with the basics and understand these things. Are you doing that? Well, I think I'm doing a pretty good job. I eat healthy. I eat clean.
That's the exact phrase. I eat clean. Yeah.
What in the actual fuck does that mean?
Keep it pretty clean.
Yeah, and I don't want to discourage people from asking for help. I'm just saying, like, what in the fuck does that actually mean for you? And if, when we ask them to, well, why don't you give me a dietary recall of what's going on, and we can have a little bit more of a conversation about this. Oh man, I don't want to do that. Like it's too much work somehow or something like that. So I've gotten on a little bit of a rant here, but I think it really comes down to like people get a little bit frustrated on top of a little bit confused, on top of a little bit of disconnected from reality. And in the end, what they're looking for is a quick solution. Like you were talking about the client that's like, it's 2 months out from Hawaii and I'm just going to exercise more. Then it turns into, okay, maybe I need to eat a little differently. And then it turns into 3 weeks out. Like I'm still not where I want to be. That was a poor plan for success. Very, very, very poor plan for success. And there is no risk to failing with that goal. There's zero risk. What's the risk? You might emotionally not feel good when you put your bathing suit on when you go to the pool, on the vacation or the beach. But there's zero risk to that. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's because there isn't enough pressure. The goal doesn't have enough liability to it, that they haven't really made the commitment they need to in order to getting it fixed. The sad part is when we get to people that now they they are experiencing that risk and they're experiencing that liability, they're sick, right? They're internally, they're not functioning well, or worse, they've had some type of a cardiac issue or metabolic issue. They're having to take medication to manage something. They felt like they've had to reach for the life jacket in some way. When all of this time, they had all these other things in order seemingly, but their house was completely out of order. So, again, I think some of the other things that come up here are, with regard to the, when they're looking out there and they're feeling confused or listening to their buddies, talk about like what worked for them. I was talking about diet tribes and things like that. Like, what's going to work best for me? Well, my buddy went on keto and that worked, and he was able to lose a couple of pounds, or a bunch of weight, and I should do that. Or my buddy started intermittent fasting. My wife's been intermittent fasting, and this has really worked well for her. Yet this is the guy that works out. And these are guys that work out 6 days a week. They're still not where they want to be in terms of a body fat percentage or performance perspective. And they're going, well, maybe I should try intermittent fasting. That might be fucking great for your wife. How active is she? Is she working out as often as you? Does she have an active job? Does she have to swing a hammer all day long like you do on the construction site? Because that might not work very well for you.
That could be a liability.
So
not fueling.
Yeah, I think people are kind of jumping into these things, on what they see working for somebody else, and that kind of gets them into the danger zone, and I think that adds to the frustration, the confusion, and then the failure to execute, on the things that they actually know, because they're latching it on to a formula, like a fixed formula of something that in the end has no individuality to it whatsoever. I'm not saying intermittent fasting is bad. Intermittent fasting can be great for you depending where you are in your process. Like if you're a performance athlete, intermittent fasting during your, when you need to perform, I'm saying that's probably not that great for you, right? Yeah. Timing of calories is important. Recovery is important, and trying to squeeze all that into 8 hours in a day.
Yeah.
Not great. However, if you're coming out of season, right? You're coming out of season, you're just trying to kind of recover to homeostasis or something like that, where you're trying to get the hormones back, and we're not working out as hard, and we're getting more sleep, and we're not as challenged with our recovery and all this stuff. Maybe that works great for you. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying there could be a time, or this might be the right time or the wrong time for you to do that based on your goal.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it's when it comes to something, we'll use intermittent fasting as the example. People hear about this. They hear their friends had some success with it. I was actually talking with somebody just today, who he says he's down 25 pounds. I started intermittent fasting, and before we had a formal consult, I had just kind of an informal chat with him. And I was, he talked about, I tried intermittent fasting, and I just kind of cut right to it. It's like, you probably just were consuming less calories.
Yep.
All that, I think people think that they're just like, all right, press the intermittent fasting button and now engage, without really understanding the fundamentals of what is actually taking place. They think that there is if I just, it's the fasting period and it's the autophagy that is happening. Again, majoring in the minors. Right. I heard that it cleans my cells and all of these mystical benefits of intermittent fasting, when it boils down to you were just eating for 15 hours a day and you just cut that in half. You just stopped. You're just not eating as many calories now.
Which is the basic fundamentals of calories in versus calories out.
Exactly. You didn't know how much you were eating before. So you just knew that you were overweight or not where you wanted to be. And then you press the intermittent fasting button and you're like, oh, I'm losing weight. There must be something to this. This is the trick. This is the magic bullet. When in reality, if you were keeping track, you just are eating less calories. That's what it boils down
99% of the time, I've seen the same thing.
And I think that, and it could apply to keto as well. Although I think that's a major pitfall. People, they cut the carbs because they think first thing, okay, I need to lose weight, therefore cut carbs. That's like the keto thing, right? And then they cut carbs without replacing it with fat. So now they're just on the no energy diet. They're just on the straight protein diet.
Severe restriction.
Yeah, probably under consuming protein, and then they lose weight initially because they are severely restricting calories. And then metabolic adaptation takes place. All of a sudden, the keto stops working. Maybe they run out of keto in their can of keto, and why isn't this working anymore? This was working before, but now you're in the hole. Now you've set yourself back. Now you reintroduce calories, and all of a sudden your body's hanging on to everything you consume.
Yeah, I think this is a good place to kind of like platform a few things. We've talked about like calories in versus calories out. The calorie is king if you're looking for weight loss, and it's very important if you're looking for muscle gain and performance gains, 100%. When you're looking at that, you have to look at the macronutrient profile. If you're looking at calories, it 100%, you have to look at if you want short or long-term results, you're going to have to look at your macro profile. Is there a perfect number for anybody on either of those, like total calories, total calorie intake and exact macro profiles? Absolutely not. There isn't. There are some frameworks you can work within. You know, I was just going back to the person that's completely fucked up their metabolism, right? Like they've just gone into the hole, right? And they're choosing keto as their way to come out of the hole. You just mentioned one of the pitfalls of that is like, well, if we need to get your total caloric intake up to come more towards maintenance because you've been so deep in a deficit, that might be very tough for you to do on that particular diet. However, the upsides to it are you're taking in a higher fat content, which might be very helpful for your hormone profiles in terms of recovering there. So again, there's this balance. How does that help me? And I bet most people listening to this are like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
Wait, what?
Wait,
more fat?
I've worked myself into a caloric deficit, right? And I'm now way underneath my caloric maintenance. I need to come up. My hormones are a little jacked up right now. And again, there's been a lot of episodes where we talk about not blaming your hormones for your problem. The hormones are not the problem. Your lifestyle and the way you ate yourself or exercised yourself, didn't rest yourself, overworked yourself, all of those didn't recover. That is what's impacting your hormones. But what do, when we start looking at things like sex hormones, and how those impact you, as well as stress hormones and the importance of fat in the system in order to produce, maintain, and both the hormones themselves and the processes. That fat is very, very important. We might actually have you on a higher fat diet to help come out of this process. And we can look at, there's 3 basic ways to kind of do this, and it's not to manage this over time, and it's not hard. It's not complicated. It is not. You do not have to be a rocket scientist to figure this out. But you do need to understand it, and you need to execute it. There's 3 really simple ways to kind of deal with this. One of those would be a reverse diet. One of those is going to be a recovery diet. And the other way is going to be knowing how to periodize your calories. That's it. Like, that's really all if you could master that, like you would find yourself in a much different position throughout the year, and being able to work with those things. The question is like, oh, I just heard you say some things, Stephen, or I just heard you say some things, Scott, where it's like, oh, I feel like that could be me. Which is it for me, the reverse diet or the recovery diet? Look, there's complexity to this. It's not complicated, but how you come out of that still goes back to the fundamentals. How many calories are you currently taking in? Yeah. What does your macro profile look like? So while the recovery and reverse diet and periodization of nutrition sounds sexy, I'm going to tell you right now, it isn't sexy at all. It's not sexy at all. It's not even that. It's not exciting, and it isn't hard to do. But you still need to understand, the fundamentals. And so you were talking about just being in that hole. You got a lot of guys coming to us in the hole. A lot of people coming to us in the hole. Females, males, whatever.
More often than people overeating.
Way more
is undereating.
Yeah, way more. I mean, percentage-wise, what would you put a percentage on it?
I mean, people that I talk to, 80%. Like, yeah, it's few people, I think, because that's obvious. I think overeating feels much more obvious to a lot of people. And now, okay, I need to lose some weight. I need to eat less. Just some super broad eat less. And that becomes
like your client.
Yeah. And that becomes hardly eating.
And so by the time they get to us, that's the situation of the state they're in. So it's not like all the people out there under eating. If that was the case, America wouldn't look like it looks. Yeah. When we say that in context, it's like most of the people by the time they get to us are under eating because
they've already tried something.
They've tried something. Yeah. Again, frustration, confusion, and poor execution of fundamentals has brought them to this point where we're like, you're not eating to the place that your body needs for homeostasis, number 1. Number 2, like before you cut, you have to be at least your maintenance. So people are like, I just did this cut. or I cut 3 times or whatever in the last 6 months or whatever to meet this goal of Hawaii or Mexico or whatever else.
Some willy-nilly ass cut.
Yeah, and that's been detrimental to your metabolic state. And so by the time they get to us, yes, they're under eating and their macronutrient profiles are a little messed up. Or, oh yeah, I've been eating a lot more protein lately. But that's been like the last 3 weeks. And what is a lot? What is a lot compared to? What are we even talking about? So, those basic principles, and again, some of that basic framework of like, hey, well, we need to get you out of this hole. How do we do that the right way? And then how do we set you up, long-term, short and long-term for success so that we don't wind back up here? And you can manage this yourself. And again, the question is that I ask a lot of people that want to tell me how much they know about nutrition. I go, then why the fuck isn't this working for you, man? Like, why are you in the situation that you're in? If you know what to do, why aren't you doing it? Going back to not being a rocket scientist, I could put a pizza and a salad in front of you, right? Most people, and they know what the better decision is if their goal is to lose weight, perform, look, and feel better. They know what the better decision is, yet they can't make the right decision. Why? That's a question you should be asking yourself if you're listening to this. Like, if you're that person, why can't you make that decision? I think the more important question about that is like, when you know what the right decision is, why don't you make the better decision?
That's a great question.
That is the bigger question, right? So when you're listening to this, or you're out there and you're questioning why I'm not getting to my goals, when you can answer that question or those questions, right? Why can't I make the right decision to execute this properly? When you get to there, then things start to change for you. And going back to your client with the protein or whatever else, there was some mental block between like, oh my God, that's so much protein, I can't eat that much. And once they get there and they start to recognize how helpful that is for them, how they feel when they do it, the result they get from it. Yeah, and they feel like they're achieving something and they're right. They're winning versus being frustrated and confused and whatever else. You get past that, that's when they stop hating the process. That's when they stop hating the process of having to manage my calories and manage my macros and, look at things like periodization, whatever, because like, I get how important this is for me. It's like, there's an education piece that comes along with it for them, for their formula. I'm not saying like they have to become nutrition experts. You want to become a nutrition expert for yourself, not for everybody else.
Yeah. For anybody else. I mean, and I think it's for some people that, that really is the $100 bajillion question is, I know what the right choice is. Why can't I make the right choice? And I think that it baffles a lot of people and it frustrates the hell out of a lot of people to the point that they don't want to look at it. So they sort of avoid it because maybe it makes them feel dumb. Like I know I shouldn't be doing this, or I know what I should be doing. Why can't I execute it?
That comes back to the whole thing of knowing your why, as far as like, why are you going down this journey? Why have you set the goal that you've set? Does this goal make sense for you?
Yeah, there needs to be something really strong tied to that.
Yeah, and that's where I always begin with clients. That's the first session is I want to understand your motivations and why you're doing this. And you saying, I want to lose weight, that's not a good enough motivation. That's
there's something else.
What is really going on here? And that's when you kind of start to dive into, behavior change psychology.
Yep.
And I think that is the bulk of coaching. That's what the coach should be there to do, is help you answer, I know what to do, why can't I do it? And let me try to shine some light. Let's notice and name what's coming up. Let me help. I'm here to ask questions and help bring awareness to you as to the answer to that question. Why do I know what to do, but I can't do it? What's blocking me?
A lot of times it has to do with eliminating that confusion, and so we have to ask a lot of questions, like because some of the not executing properly, not making that right decision lies in the confusion of, well, if I do, this is a stupid one. I'm going to say it's stupid. And people are like, oh, well, maybe I guess I'm stupid. This is not to disparage anybody. But what you do at the dinner table on Friday night cannot get outworked in the gym on Saturday morning. That is not how the energy intake and expense system works in your body. So like you go out and you party on Friday night, it's like, oh fuck, I gotta go to the gym, spend 2 hours on the treadmill, do
the
a
penance
triple
cardio,
day.
yeah.
Like that's a thing. People still think that that's okay. Like they're watching their calorie counters on their watch or on the machine or whatever the next day. Blows my mind. Like, again, you own your own business, you have a family, you have, finances that you manage, and this is how we're balancing things. It blows my mind. Like there's confusion there, right? It's like, no, this is not how this works. So, I mean, that being one of those things where people are stepping into a time where there's almost like, and with that, I think in recognizing that how silly that sounds when you really think about it. I eat the cheesecake. It was 2,000 calories. I go to the gym. I burn 2,000 calories. That offsets the cheesecake. Think about this for a second. I'm going to pause. That is fucking ridiculous. Doesn't work like that, right? So, then when they realize that, they're like, there's almost like some shame associated with like, why would I even think that? And I've been doing this for so long. And then there's like a throwing up of the hands, like, man, I've got this all wrong. I'm so far on the hole. I'm kind of all over the place.
Why bother you?
That drives a couple different things. Yeah, it either drives, let me go to the extreme, whatever that is, the diet tribe, the new workout program, the extreme restriction of calories or whatever else, or I just don't give a fuck. I'm not going to do anything. I'm never going to get any better anyway. The self-loathing and all the things that come along with that. I've noticed some different things. I don't know about you guys, generally differences between males and females and how they handle that thought process. Maybe talk about that for a second, just in terms of where they come into their process with, particularly in the beginning stages, as we're coaching them, not what they're doing on their own. I don't know. I can only assume, and I never try to do too much of that. But when they come to us from a client perspective, like I see how they work through the problems kind of in the beginning. And I think there's some very distinct differences. And I want to sort of bring attention to those. And so here's an example. I feel like for the most part, when I work with females, they're much more willing to have the conversations, go a little deeper into the conversation about like the why and the motivation and what it is that they're really trying to achieve. And if I ask them very specifically, how are you going to know if you've arrived at their goal? That they've thought through this right there. And there's always some depth to this answer, right? Versus when I talk to males about it, it generally isn't as developed. There might be one thing they're hanging on. And I'm not saying that's a wrong or a right thing. I'm just saying it's like, I just, want to be more fit. I'm tired of being fat. I'm tired of being tired. Okay. Being tired of being fat, being tired of being tired. Like those are legit things. I get it. But there's also more to that. Where have you gone with this? Yeah. And so as we're having the conversation, they're more like, just give me the answer so that I'm not fat anymore. Mm-hmm. Just give me the answer to this problem so I'm not tired anymore and I'll do it. Versus
just give me the solution.
Give me the solution. Yeah. Right. And so when they find out, males particularly, when they find out that solution is not as easy to come to, or let's just say the solution, which is not being fat or tired anymore, is going to take a much longer time to get to than there's
no one sentence answer to it.
Because they never went there. Like, how am I going to unfuck myself here? Right? It's I don't need to know all the things. I just want to pay for it and I want to be told. Right? Versus the females are much more willing to go into, here's all the things that I'm doing. They're taking a much more practical approach to it. They're much more open to conversations, and they also recognize how this is impacting them, like from a frustration level. I'll just say from like an emotional level. Mm-hmm. Like, this has been really hard for me, and here's the reasons why. Versus the dudes they're either doing it or they're not. They're either on the wagon or they're not. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the general vibe is men want to try to brute force everything. Mm-hmm. Like, how do I just go hard in the gym? Clearly I'm not, I must be, I've been lazy. I've been undisciplined. I need to just work out harder. I need to, I need to just get my shit together, get my act together. But they actually haven't visited, how they got to where they are now in the first place and what the real driving force is. And I think that comes back to the question of, I know what to do, but I'm not doing it. Mm-hmm. I think because you just don't understand why you aren't executing. And you think that men just think that they can just brute force their way into it. Or
go back to a period in life or a period in time when they were brute forcing it, or they didn't even have to think about it that much. And it somehow worked for them. Like, if I just go back to this, again, not fully understanding what that
was, yeah.
Yeah, that even was at that time. They're constantly reach back for that. And then, oftentimes by the time they get to us as coaches, a lot of times there's a point of desperation. And they're starting to feel some of those things, like I mentioned, like a little self-loathing or a little shame, but they don't want to admit that yet. And so that also, because it's there and they don't want to admit it, we don't have to hug, and talk about our feelings, from a coach-client perspective. I'm just telling you, but I do recognize that is some real shit, right? And you need to confront that, right? And whether we're talking about it or we're just acknowledging it, like, yeah, man, I do not feel good about myself right now. Okay. So, because there are things that we can latch onto there when you're making the poor decision, right? Or you're not able to execute in that, again, to go back to the pizza and salad example, right? Think about that. Like, you don't have to develop this with me. Like, I want to have a connection with you as a coach. I do, because I know that when I do that, there are a million coaches out there that can give macro plans and
it's the easiest part of the job.
It's so fucking easy, and that isn't coaching.
Nope.
That isn't coaching. That's just giving information, right? That could be teaching, but it's not coaching, maybe. There's a million people that are out there, and if you're a person that just wants to work through the problem and be given that, okay. I just haven't seen a lot of long-term success there. There's very few people, and everybody listening to this shows either is one of those people or maybe knows one of those people is like, look, just point me in the right direction and I will figure this shit out. I'm not going to make excuses. I'm just going to go. The reality of it is you can't know it all, and you don't have to know it all. Some people, they will figure it out. Most people will not in this particular instance. So again, as we're circling back to like the differences between the males and the females, I just see like the males are coming in as like, give me an answer. But they don't recognize that getting to the answer is going to take a little time. And in my experience with this, it's like, okay, first we need to do is kind of sit down. And again, when I say make that connection, it's like, I need to know about you, man. Like, where is this coming from? And more specifically, I'm not going to ask you about your feelings right out of the gate. Where, as a lot of times with females, I can get there a little faster. I'm just being honest, because they're more willing to share. They're more
in touch with them.
They're more in touch with them. Like, we're big fucking stupid animals, right? That want to, again, like, power through everything in this business, and in the firearms side of things, the fitness, fighting, firearms kind of stuff that I spend a lot of time in. There's a lot of that, right? I acknowledge that it's fine. We're just big stupid animals a lot of the time. But in the reality of it there's a lot more connection, I think, emotional connection that guys have with themselves, dudes have with themselves there. They just don't want to talk about it. And that's fine. I'm not getting into that with you right away.
We're not therapists, yeah.
And I'm not there with you. So, but let's talk about like all the other stuff. Like, tell me about your history with exercise. Tell me about your diet history. Tell me about your health history, and tell me about how you got to me today. Like, why are we even having this conversation today? And you might give me some stuff. And again, we're not trying to have a therapy session here, but I think the closer you get connected with all that as a dude, right? And you can share a little bit of it with me as a coach, it helps me help you find the right answer, for you in those tougher times.
Helps put the pieces together. And I think even just being, a lot of times men are not ever even asked those questions. Mm-hmm. Because 100%. Other men aren't asking them those questions.
You're not talking about it.
Talking about sleep too. Yeah. So what's your sleep like? What's your stress like?
Those conversations, if your nutrition coach or your fitness coach is not talking to you about that stuff, that's a red flag to me. Like, that stuff has to come up. And when those questions about sleep, stress management start to come up, as a hot topic within the conversation or something we really need to hone in on, it starts leading down a couple of other things as we start to get maybe into, how's your body recovering? How is your energy level, right? And I don't just mean like, how do you get through work or your workouts? What's your
sex drive?
What's your sex drive like? How is that relationship going? Like, where are you feeling now versus where you were feeling before? Those kind of things. That's when you start getting into a little bit more of like, yeah, man, that shit sucks right now. Like, it's not good, or whatever the case is. So, and then maybe some of that stuff comes up. But that's the stuff I want to know, because that going to help me go back to like, okay, well, now we're looking at macros. Like, the fucking the C-Coke equation, super simple, right? We can figure that out real fast, right? The macros, I can figure the numbers out real fast. I can help you figure out the numbers real fast in terms of what makes sense from a framework perspective. But more importantly, what's going to make sense in terms of how we balance those based on your current situation, right? Your current situation being like, dude, you're telling me your sex drive is really low. You're having some blood tests done. Like your T's in the toilet, you know, like, or your estrogen's really high, or your cortisol's through the roof or whatever. That's where the nuance begins. And that's where I think a lot of people want to like get lost in the weeds before they've started with the basics. But we need to talk about this. Like, and that's where like, okay, so since we're here, we need to, we're going to try this first and start to move our way forward. And going back, some people can sort of figure that out on their own. Most people can't. And they spend a lifetime not understanding any of those things. And it's a lifetime of frustration of this battling back and forth with the weight gain and the weight loss and the feeling depressed and the having shitty sex drive and the not seeing the results in the gym and not ever really having what you really want and need because you haven't spent enough time connecting to those fundamentals and the basics that are going on there. I think, you know, so as you like, what do you have to do there? I think it's simple. Like, you need to take some time to figure all this out so that you can figure out a plan. Sitting down on a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning, whatever, for 2 hours to figure out your TDEE, your total daily energy expenditure against what your total caloric need is against your macro numbers. You could literally go onto the internet and you could do this inside an hour. That is not a fucking plan.
No.
It's not a plan. There's so many missing pieces to that plan. And so going back to like, well, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, kind of. Like, you understand the concepts.
From a very broad, from a very broad perspective. But, you know, the stress, the sleep, like sometimes, though, you know, we ask those questions and all of a sudden, like the floodgates sort of open and it's like, now you hadn't thought about that part, had you?
This is you just like, you got context. Holy shit, I can see the leaves on the tree.
Yeah.
You know, like, and so you're leading the horse to water and hoping that they'll start to drink, you know, at the appropriate pace that makes sense for them. And that's where things really start to take shape. Like, oh, okay. So now we're having these different, like, deeper level conversations. And you need to be able to have those conversations with yourself. Going back to the questions, like, you know what the right choice is between these two foods here, right? You know it's going to make you feel better, yet you're still making the wrong decision. Maybe it's because you don't fully understand what we just talked about there.
Maybe it's because you had a hard day at work, a hard week, you're stressed out, and your willpower is low, and I just want the fucking pizza. I don't want to.
And by the way, people, you can have pizza. Yeah. Just understand what the implications of that pizza may or may not be on the bigger picture. So getting an understanding of that bigger picture up front, like, we spend, I would say, about the first 30 days of 90% of people's programs, like coaching programs, are spent, the first 30 days are pretty much spent the same way. I mean, the framework is very, very similar. The solution, the total solution for the problem gets figured out inside kind of this framework. It's like, once we have like a diet history, health history, exercise history, lifestyle, sleep, stress management, we start to get all that kind of mapped out. Like, where are we really and where have we really been? And when we're examining those things, are the things we need to be looking into deeper? Because let's get out in front of that shit, right? Let's not, if we can, we want to try to work on as few assumptions as we possibly can. That might, you know, I don't want to get too far into the rabbit hole there, but let's try to get that shit out in front of us right now. And part of that is understanding what your goal is, why it is you need, what's your why, what's driving you? Are you borrowing this why from somebody else? Is it something as shallow as, you know, quite frankly, like, I want to go, you know, I just want to look good on the beach in 2 months. Okay. I'm going to tell you that isn't going to be strong enough for most people to get them to do the work that they need to do to have a lifetime of success. What have I done for you in 2 months? If you've gained all that weight back, if you just gain all that weight back in the next month, I've done shit. I'm a horrible coach as far as I'm concerned. That's the way I look at it. I have not coached you. I have set you up for failure. Because if I diet you down, if I say if I just say, I can take you and we'll put together this plan so you can take off 10 pounds and look, you know, leaner in your bathing suit, knowing that during that time, I'm sinking you deeper into the hole, and then it's going to take you that much longer. It's going to do that much more, you know, I just, for lack of a better term, damage, you know, in the long run. That's not coaching. That's bullshit.
You're fly by night. Yeah.
That's bullshit. That's like going to the range and training with a coach that does, or a trainer that does nothing but shoots drills and tells you to run it again. You're not coaching me to get better, dude. It's like going to the gym and not getting an assessment and or an organized plan. from a coach, I would expect there's going to be an assessment, like, and I'm going to be told, like, hey, here's some things we need to be careful of. Here's some things we can really focus on. Here's some strengths and weaknesses. Here's what you should be thinking long-term, right? That's what coaching is to me. I get that people are just looking for the quick fix, but inside that 30 days, that needs to happen up front. The next thing that kind of happens is, okay, now that we understand where we are, like, what do we need to do, from a caloric intake perspective versus our expenditure? How do we balance these macros? How do these work for us? How do they make us feel? And keeping a close eye on what's really going on during that time. A lot of things are getting figured out during that time. A lot of questions are being answered asked and answered. And it should be by the client and by the coach. Should be close monitoring of that. Again, if you're not into the coaching thing, okay, and you can do that on your own, that just means you need to have a high level of awareness. Yeah. Always checking, like journaling, tracking, like what's really happening, not what do I think is happening.
Yeah. And I think that's really, you've talked about several aspects of what coaching actually is. And I think that's, especially on the nutrition end. People think they're going to come to me and I'm going to say, eat this for breakfast, eat this for lunch, eat this for dinner. I'll see you in a week.
Nope.
Like they think that they're going to get a diet prescription. And then I actually had somebody almost give me some pushback when I was just like, tell me about like your stress levels. Like, tell me about how you're sleeping. Like, why the fuck why are you asking me that? I'm like, because it's important. But you can't obviously get into a back and forth, but over time, it's like, if you give me enough time, you'll understand why I'm asking about that. And the way I kind of view it as, a coach is like, okay, say there's now this might be a bit of a long analogy, but roll with me. You're on one side of a river, and it's dark, and you need to get to the other side of the river. There are rocks that you can step on. There's maybe a few different ways that you could get across, but it's dark. You can't really see. You could just try to, the men, like, I'm just going to fucking sprint into the river and I'm going to just grab whatever rock I can and I'm going to try to jump and I'm going to, I'm just going to go head on into it. Versus someone who has a coach, I can't get across the river for you, but I have a flashlight and I'm going to shine that. Well, there's a rock over there. Okay, well, there's an alligator. So you might not want to go that way. So you could go this way. You could kind of go that rock, or over here, there's a bigger rock. And then maybe you could, it's shallower over there. So maybe you get the idea. That's really the coach is a guide, helping you see the different ways that you could go and just making suggestions. Hey, what about that path? Does that path look good to you? Do you think that you could do that? Or do you think, can you jump from that rock to that rock? That seems too far. Okay, well, how about this path? Let's try this instead. That's really...
But that person has to make the decision.
Yeah, but I can't. Yeah, but I can't cross the river for you.
Yeah, here's a really great... I think looking at that that's a fantastic analogy, because when people see the results of others, we have hundreds of thousands of clients that we've trained over the years, right? Hundreds of clients from the nutrition perspective, because we spent the majority of our time on the fitness end of things. But I guess my point of this is people look at a particular client that did these things. She's lost 50 pounds, right? She's now working out 5 days a week because she wants to, and she can in a healthy manner to get to her goal and maintain this healthy lifestyle. Whereas in the beginning, like, it was tough to get her started to do 2 days, and so. This is Susie, right? And then here's Mary over here looking at it going, well, I want to do what Susie did because I want those kind of results. And the reality of it is like, hey, listen, this is what we did for this lady, right? This is what we did for Susie. Here's the steps that we took her through in the process. And what you were just saying there is like, it was dark. There was a river. Right? She wanted to get to the other side. You can see what she looks like now on this. She's made it. She's arrived on that other side, and she continues now to be able to cross the other rivers and streams that she has in front of her. But when we started, like, we didn't really know. We had to get a flashlight. We had to understand what her ability was, so that we could help her. Like, that rock is definitely too far for Susie to step right now. So we got to find one that's a little closer. And by the way, that other side, as you mentioned, like, has the alligator on it. And we know how the alligator, because we've We've worked with Susie now. We know how that's going to impact her. Like, she's going to freak the fuck out. So we're staying away from that for right now.
Yeah.
Later on down the line, we'll face the alligator. She'll be okay because she'll know what to do. She'll have the strength. She'll have the motivation. She'll have the mindset to be able to get past that, right? She'll have the tools in her toolbox or whatever in her backpack in order to move past that slot. Here's my point. The point is that we have a solution. We have a framework that we work within, and we find solutions for people within the framework, right? And I want to help people with those solutions, right? And we have a framework that's been very, very successful. And so if when people come in, they're like, well, how does it work? You were just, and this circles back to the meal plans. Like, Susie didn't need a fucking meal plan. Susie needed to know how to get from point A to point B first. And on her way there, we talked about how she could build a meal plan for herself and how choosing certain foods, right? And maybe substituting those with other things, managing this macro balance a little bit differently would put her in a much better position to get to that next rock. Not, here's all the steps in the process. This is what we think the river's going to look like for you.
Yeah.
Good luck. This is going to cost you this much money. Good luck. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And if that didn't work, I'll just adjust it again, and we'll see if that works.
Exactly. Yeah. Give you step 1, step 2, step 3, and then walk away. Like, if somebody gave you a piece of paper as to how to cross that river, do you think you're going to be able to execute that?
Yeah. I think there's a time and a place for that. Like when you start to look at, athletes and how they understand things, and they need more of a linear type plan like that. But the thing to understand here is that your results, your journey will never, ever, ever get linear. It's never linear. It will always have its ups and downs. And so the goal with coaching or with getting in, trying to understand your nutrition is understanding for yourself how to manage those ups and downs. But also having somebody, and part of that includes building a team around you, whether that's a coach or just a support network, be at your gym, at work, in your family, with your friends or whatever, that can help you when the bandwidth starts getting low on that shit. When you're getting tired, when you're getting fatigued, or when you're kind of stepping off track, who can help you get, sometimes that means eliminating things in your life, eliminating the hurdles, eliminating the pitfalls that you already know, you've set for yourself. Getting those things out of there. And sometimes you just need to hear it from somebody else. But I think, at the end, it's just understanding that framework as a whole. And it doesn't take a long time generally. Again, like I usually say, it's right around 30 days, right? For people, if you're meeting with them regularly enough, or they're within our framework, you're meeting with a coach, or you're going through, we have our self-guided programs, which provide you constant touches, whether that's through video, reading, and even just following along with some of the stuff we do on social media to keep you moving in the right direction, but also provide you dude, I don't fucking understand this at all. And you can reach out to us, right? And we can help you. And some people like to do things on their own, They want to be their own problem. Their own pace, their own problem solver. They're not in any rush to get it done. They're not feeling they don't want to feel any pressure, of a coach, which has its, again, there's benefits and pros and cons to having a coach in that sense. If you're that type of person that doesn't want to feel too accountable. But if you're one of those people that can really hold yourself accountable and likes achieving little goals at a time and working through that, then that's our Feel You program, right? That's our self-guided, online program, educational nutrition success program. And we put that thing together for those people, right? It's also a way to kind of get a taste, right? The other way is, through the one-on-one coaching program that we have, where you have somebody that's meeting with you regularly, you're having those conversations, and they're giving you that, they're the person holding the flashlight for you. If you're a person that needs a flashlight, then that's probably the better route for you. And I understand for people, it's very hard to make that commitment because maybe they've had other people hold the flashlight for them in the past and they've been let down. Or that person wasn't the person that they thought, that person ended up not being the person they thought they would be, or they talked a good game and didn't really know. And now we started getting off into the weeds in stuff that, wasn't ultimately helpful versus what we need to understand is the fundamentals. And the person that's holding the flashlight understands that. If you can't see, then this is going to be a disaster.
You're not going to get across that river.
Or you're not getting across. So there's an education piece that needs to come along with this. And education generally, if you're a person that, has a problem with accountability sometimes. You can easily find an excuse, easily kind of wiggle out or, come up with some bullshit. somebody that can hold you accountable and not sign off on that bullshit, I think is super important for a lot of people. And again, that's where the one-on-one thing comes in. And then there's understanding that framework, working within that framework, and sometimes going, I don't think I need a one-on-one coach, but I heard what you were saying before about like me trying to overdo things or getting lost in the weeds or trying to major in the minors, and on the fringes. And I'm just trying to get a little bit better performance or lose a little bit more body fat. And I seem to really be struggling. It doesn't matter like how much working out I'm doing or how much I know. I think I'm eating enough protein. Like I've done the math, man. Like I'm on, but something's not right here. I'm not getting what I need. Then we've actually just recently come up with what we're calling our Group Feel You program, which we'll be doing kind of intermittently and in sessions over the year, where you can get the online coaching program, but that also comes with weekly meetings with a coach from like a group format. It also includes two-way messaging. So 24/7, you could reach out to your coach. The coach is going to get back to you about whatever your things are. So for that person that's like, I just want the basics and I want to move at my own pace, then you do the self-guided program. But if you want like I like the idea of moving my own pace and kind of doing this on my own and doing it from wherever I am, irrespective of the country, because I'm not, or world for that matter, because I'm not near Red Dot. You can do this, right, and have the benefit of meeting weekly to get you through this first 30 days that's where most people get the most out of the coaching. After that, once we've laid this foundation down, then it's like now we're working the solution that we've come up with in the first 30 days. Like this is what your solution should look like. Now it's about executing that solution. And for our one-on-one clients, they practice the next couple of months or so with the coach, like with Stephen, really working through the execution of the solution. And I was pretty good at crossing that river. I'm now at this other river. Water's moving a little faster here. Yeah. Or there's not as many, steps to take. I've got to kind of figure this problem out a little bit differently. It's not working for me the same as maybe it did last time. Or, I have questions here. That's really what the ongoing coaching is about for a lot of people. And sometimes it's just like, I just need a tune-up. I just need to check in, or I've had all this success, I've lost a bunch of weight, I feel much better. All my biomarkers are starting to change. Everything's looking good. But now I really want to look good for that vacation. Now I feel like I'm in a really good position to do that and do it in a healthy way. Can we do a cut? How would I do that? What would that look like for me? So we help with like the periodization piece and putting stuff together so we can walk you through and help you through that, getting ready for that event or whatever else.
Or even the fact that, you've gone through this weight loss period and now what? We can help set you up for the longevity component as far as making sure that you're dialed in for your maintenance. And so you don't regress backwards. Or should you regress a little bit, you know how to fine tune where you're currently at.
It's never linear. Mm-hmm. It's never linear.
Yeah, how do you make it stick?
How do you make it stick? Exactly. How do you make it stick for you? Right now, how do you latch on to the next thing? Like, what's the new fad, or what's the next thing for you? Again, I think where most people probably need to start with this is like asking themselves the question: like, if you think you know it, and you've had success in the past, and you're not getting the results that you want, you're not close, and or your health has been compromised as a result of those things. Mm-hmm. And again, you keep telling yourself, I know what to do, and you're not fucking doing it. Well, you need to ask yourself that question. And when you come up with that answer, then you need to ask for some help. Because I don't think that my bet would be, based on your track record, that history is going to repeat itself, because it often does. The thing is it doesn't have to repeat itself the same way. It will repeat, but it doesn't have to repeat itself the same way. And that's what you need to get figured out. So making better decisions and understanding the reasons why. But also along the process, one of the things I think that I take the most pride in is helping the people to not hate the process, right? Of finding this out. So many people, have come out the other side, myself included, just like hating. Like, I got meal plans when I first started. Like I was giving out meal plans when I first started as a coach. Like, and people hated it. They're like, but I don't like this, or I don't like that, or I can't eat 7 times a day. Of course they couldn't eat 7 times a day. Like, that was ridiculous. Like, or 6 times a day, or even 5 times a day. Like, no, you don't have to eat like that. But my point is like giving those meal plans to people. Like, if you're reaching for that at this point, and you're you're still can't answer the question of why, even if I'm given a plan, can I make the right decision or even execute the plan? Those are things you need to examine, because once you do again and you kind of get that you don't have to suffer, right? It doesn't have to suck. There's going to be some work you have to put in here, but if you do the work, you will get to a point where you can control this on your own and really start to make those decisions and understand, even when you decide, like, I'm going to make the other decision today, you can feel good about that too, rather than feeling guilty about it and beating yourself up about it. And then going back to those extremes of, well, I suck, I'm a horrible person, like, look at me, I'm never going to figure this out. Or the other one was like, I just need the next most extreme diarrhea tea that I could possibly find with all the supplements, right? That's going to be the answer. Mm-hmm. I don't know. What do you want to add, Stephen, to the whole, this is what kind of the offerings are, like in terms of how we help people or what they might be looking for if they're looking somewhere else for answers?
Yeah, I mean, I think, just kind of understanding that, it doesn't have to suck. I think that's a key point that you made. Then that's a big emphasis of mine. And we get back to, we had this conversation the other day. I think typically men are like, well, it has to be hard. I need it to be harder. I need it to suck more, or, I'm not disciplined.
I need to be shamed. I need to, I need to be beat up to feel like I'm working hard. Again, going back to the working hard versus getting results are two different things.
Yeah, and over time, there's not going to be someone there cracking the whip on you all the time. You need to be able to develop something that is sustainable, where you don't have to have your ass chewed to keep it going. And just clarifying some things. That's really, I'm here to make suggestions, shine the flashlight. Hey, you know what? That alligator, we can deal with the alligator later. That rock is a little mossy. Maybe we should start with this. What do you think? It's really what it boils down to.
Yeah. Again, so you're part of the process as a client, and the coach is part of the process as the coach, not the person that's doing all the things, just helping you through the different things. We did. If people want to know more about the Fuel You program, we did a very detailed episode on all the things. It's episode number 51. You got to dig back in the feed. It was almost a year ago now. You may have heard it. If you didn't, you'll hear Cece and I think you were on this.
This is Jeff and Taylor.
Taylor, yeah, we had Taylor in here, one of our other coaches at the time, really talking about these things and a lot of the nuance within the program, kind of what it involves. The steps in the process, how it's structured and all that stuff. You're going to hear us talking a little bit more about Fuel You coming forward. Again, this group program, for those people listening, Stephen and I are, we've been talking about this a lot. There's been a lot of planning going into the group Fuel You. We're about to launch that. Stay tuned for that. I don't know when you're going to hear this, but this will be an ongoing program that Stephen and I will both be behind. I encourage people to get into it. I'm excited about it. It's something I wanted to do more than a year ago. And Moon, Sun, and Stars just didn't really align for us. Now we've really put in the work with a good plan for execution. And it's been successful with us. We've done it before. It just, Stephen and I haven't done it before. We're going to approach it a little bit different way this time. And, like from the group coaching sessions, you'll see both Stephen and I in there. Inside the materials, you see some of our other coaches. I think it's a pretty robust program. So I'm looking forward to launching this and getting that out there. So stay tuned for that. And then you can always check out rdffuelu.com to get the to read a little bit more about the program and kind of what's inside it. I always say this, the program itself. Look, we highlight. Here's some of the things that are in there. It's not the material that makes the program successful. It's how you apply the material to yourself. And I really feel like we took that first 30 days of what most clients need to know in order to be successful. I don't care what level you're at. I don't care what level you're at. Look, if you're trying to be a competitive bodybuilder and step up on stage, ripped, this isn't the program for you. Get a coach, for God's sakes, right? This isn't it.